Eternals. You know, it was Oscar-winning director, one of the cr- craziest casts. You know, you had like legends. You had Salma Hayek. You had Angelina Jolie. You had new people who were amazing: Brian Tyree Henry, Barry Keoghan, who have both been nominated for
So
Oscars
you
since
thought it was
then.
just a slam dunk.
But it wasn't. It's certainly not the best Marvel movie ever made, not even the best Marvel movie made that year, but I still think it's worth a watch. Welcome to Sandwich Reviews. I'm the Talking Sentient Sandwich, and I think The Eternals is a pretty great movie with one massive flaw. Before I get to that flaw, I do want to talk about everything in the movie that worked, because a lot did. A lot of it is shot on location, and you can tell. The few times that green screen was used, it's almost impossible to compare it to the rest of the shots, just because it seems real. There are some shots where I genuinely can't tell if it's shot on a green screen, on the volume, or on location, and I love that. And the reason for that is how well planned out the movie and its shooting was. The CG and effects are just as planned out as well, and because of that, it looks incredible. The powers the characters displayed and the locations they went to were more fantastical and awe-inspiring than the last. Despite plenty of really good effects, my favorite in the movie, at this very moment, was Arishem. The size and scale of him was jaw-dropping, and the way they were able to convey how ancient and powerful he was practically brought me to my knees. And when he teleported away from Earth via a black hole and the movie just ended, I was flabbergasted. More people should be talking about how crazy that ending was. Though I will get back to that cliffhanger ending, I want to talk a little bit more about the effects and characters, because there's a few things I still want to mention. First of which is how I sat up in my seat whenever Makari was on screen. She was a cool character and everything, but what drew me in was her super speed. Without any slow motion, they were able to depict incredibly fast speeds whenever she used her powers. They used an unoriginal blur effect whenever she ran, but it was still shot with a lot of thought put into making it look as good as possible. For instance, she had this sonic boom attack that they used maybe twice in the whole movie, but whenever she did it, it blew me away. Some of the other Eternals had powers related to materializing this yellow force. Not only did I like the consistency and the energy inside them, but I loved how a lot of these were almost anime inspired. I understand that the Eternals themselves predate the reference, but you can't tell me Kumail Nanjiani's power wasn't meant to be a spirit gun. In fact, a lot of these characters and archetypes are pulled directly from something else, and that's even referenced in the movie itself. Most of the Eternals are named so you could guess what kind of person they are and what powers they have, and for most of them, that guess would probably be accurate. I think the most egregious example of this is Thena, though I do understand wanting to make her the wise warrior. That being said, they do make a point of that being one of her emotional touchstones to everyone else, and the fact that the Greek goddess of wisdom was presumably named after her in the Marvel Universe is fun, though it does bring up some plot holes, because Athena technically also exists in the same way Thor does. One person who goes against the archetype set for him is Icarus, and that's a big reason why I really like this movie. Frankly, there have been almost too many evil Supermen lately, but I at least understand where Icarus is coming from. Him flying into the sun is a little on the nose, but everything else with his character is great. But on the topic of characters being inspired by and even referenced as others, Icarus is compared to Superman numerous times, which is slightly weird. Would that mean that inside the Marvel Universe people read DC Comics? Because Batman is also referenced in Eternals. I don't know. And it also doesn't matter. But I had to bring it up. If you haven't already guessed what it is, the big flaw that I hinted at earlier has to do with two specific characters. But a case could be made that there are just flat out too many characters introduced in the movie to begin with. Some, like Caron the camera guy, were welcome inclusions. But the fact that there were 10 separate ancient superheroes that the audience was meant to care for kinda worked against the movie. Though, there were 2 more Eternals from the comics that were intended to be in the movie, but thankfully they were cut out. Yet, I still think even after adding a couple more, the movie wouldn't have been any more confusing or overwhelming, because working with what they had, the writers still managed to make each Eternal memorable. I may have been a fan of Neil Gaiman's Eternals run before going into the movie, but I didn't know any of these characters that well. Yet, I considered the movie a success after I walked out and I was able to name each and every one of the Eternals. And not just that, I genuinely cared for a lot of them and wanted to see their continued adventures. Maybe it was because I really liked Gilgamesh, almost more than the others, but when he died, I got bummed out. I definitely could have used more focused on him and Thena, but the writers still chose to focus the narrative on one of the Eternals rather than them as a whole. A lot of the movie was about getting the band back together, reintroducing the audience to them one by one, which is the correct way to go about the story, but that flaw I've been hinting at just had to rear its ugly head. Because while I did like all the characters, the entire movie was predicated on a relationship that the filmmakers actively told us not to be invested in. If the writers had the intention of diving deep into the psyche of not being able to romantically let someone go, then by all means, give us a love triangle with the two Game of Thrones guys. But there's no thematic intent anywhere close to that. Instead, Cersei and Ikaris were just two attractive people that we were told cared a lot for each other. They are a good couple, and it's nice to see them get married in Babylon, but even that felt a little forced. Moviegoers have a strange sense of knowing when they're being manipulated into being emotionally attached to something or someone. Sorry, I misspoke there. Moviegoers have a strange sense of knowing when they're being manipulated poorly. I did like their relationship as we learned about it, delving into their past during the events of the movie, and plenty of focus and screen time is given to them and their romance. Yet the movie starts with Cersei already having begun another relationship. And it's not one of those movies from the 90s where the new boyfriend is a big jerk that needs to be dealt with. The new guy is none other than a nice version of Jon Snow. And I'm not even kidding, he's the Black Knight, and the post-credits scene is him getting his cursed sword. So if you're confused about who this random guy is, he's just Jon Snow. And in case the audience might have forgotten about him after the first act and somehow managed to care for Ikaris and Cersei, he FaceTimes into the movie to make sure he's front and center in everyone's mind. That way, every single person in the movie can feel weird about how close Cersei and Ikaris are getting because we're all thinking about how she's pretty much cheating on her new boyfriend. I mean, other than setting him up as the Black Knight, why was he in the movie? He has nothing to do, and any kind of conversation about him falling in love with an ancient inhuman robot isn't discussed at all past him declaring that he would love Cersei no matter what. I mean, that's great for you two, but I don't know this guy. Dane seems nice, but he should have just been cut from the movie and saved for later. If Marvel is so set on setting up a Midnight Suns team with the Black Knight on it, do it in a better way than throwing him in a random movie that he has nothing to do with and nothing to do in. But anyway, when we get to the climax of the movie and Ikaris has been revealed as the villain, it doesn't hit as hard as it should. We should be feeling the thousands of years of trust crumbling around Cersei, and I did think it was a good choice that made the movie infinitely more interesting, but it still could have been better. Though Gemma Chan does a phenomenal job in that first moment where she learns about Ikaris's true intent, the overall betrayal and heartbreak just wasn't there, and I wish it was. The entire emotional core of the movie is between them. When Ikaris has the chance to stop Cersei and he doesn't, the music swells and he's tearing up, but I don't feel anything. By that time, I was supposed to be bought into their relationship, but even then, I was thinking of Dane. Despite all of that, I still have fun every time I watch The Eternals, which is surprising that I would watch it more than once or twice, and even more surprising that a movie with that much runtime and that many characters would be able to entertain me throughout. I remember going back to the theater and paying for another ticket simply because I wanted to pay as close attention to Ikaris as I could. His reactions to everything were really well done. And if you ever catch yourself watching Eternals again, watch Richard Madden's acting very closely, because he does a really good job at setting the seeds for later if you know what to look for. But before I get into any kind of discussion on its possible sequel, I do want to bring up one last negative. I talked about how amazing the production and overall look for this movie was, and I do stand by that, but very early on, someone decided to make everything minimalistic, and I don't think that was the right choice. All it takes is one look at Jack Kirby's original Eternals artwork, and you'd get why the designs in the movie came off as uninspired. Even the consistent yellowish energy inside them came off as a direct ripoff of another famous sci-fi culture, that being the recent Doctor Who storylines with the other Time Lords and their Gallifreyan technology. However, I still want to see a sequel. I mentioned how monumental the cliffhanger for the movie is, but I don't think many people have put into consideration how big the sequel to this could be. I understand being hesitant to make it, but I need to see the conclusion for how the Eternals are going to get out of ruining Arisham's plans to create another Celestial. And I think the story in that sequel could be an incredibly intriguing, cosmos-spanning adventure that could be thought-provoking if nothing else. Because the entire idea of the Celestials using the Eternals for the protection of nature goes against the very concept of nature, diving further into the idea that both the Eternals and the Deviants are Arisham's children, and Arisham's failure overall. Yet, in the Marvel Universe, Celestials are the only reason life is able to function. Galactus is where you really dive deep into the themes of nature and the unstoppable forces behind it, but why not begin that overarching theme with the sequel to the Eternals? Honestly, I'm really surprised we haven't seen the sequel already just because Marvel waved a check in front of Harry Styles, and he appeared in the post-credits as Star Fox. No, not that Star Fox. Let's just call him Eros. Because while I do believe that Marvel cast him purely for his name recognition, I still think he could be great in the sequel. Plus, I've never really had a problem with casting for name recognition to begin with. I doubt I'm right, but possible spoiler warning. But I think Harry Styles could be the perfect casting for Eros because I want him to be the twist villain. Marvel has been featuring more and more twist villains lately, and as long as it's done well, I will always appreciate them, Icarus definitely being included. I'm not sure if Eros would be going about his villainy for his own interests, or if he's being controlled by the Celestials, but I think Harry Styles could do a really good job playing a conniving bastard that you love to hate. Someone who oozes charisma, but a little too much. Imagine Tony Stark, but 10 times more self-serving and cutthroat. It hasn't been confirmed at time of recording this, but please, Marvel, make a sequel to the Eternals. And if you haven't given the first a fair chance, give it another go. You might be surprised at how fun it can be, though even I have to admit, it can get a little boring at parts. But before I sign off, I have one last thought to leave you with. It's one that has been shouted from every blog and corner of the internet, but I'm genuinely curious if we'll ever see the statue of Tiamat coming out of the earth again. There have been rumors surrounding the plot of the Thunderbolts and how that team will go into the giant celestial statue to find adamantium, but that hasn't been confirmed. Even if that is the case, gotta say, it's kinda weird that that thing has been barely mentioned since then. Maybe it's just because it's the Marvel Universe and something crazy and life-altering happens once every other week, but I feel like that would be a bigger concern to some people. But anyway, thanks for watching. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and enjoy a delicious sandwich.